welcome to another episode of Management Unfiltered. I'm Kirk Teachout, and I've got Shelley here. To what? What are you?
I'm pointing to your face and then my
Oh,
face.
okay. I was like, what?
And
What in
then
the
you got
world?
both of us.
It's like, okay, that makes more
Finger
sense. Okay,
puppets.
but either way, we're gonna jump on in here now with that awkward pause of you. You got to stop expecting your associate to think like an owner. Okay. And office managers, this is for you too. It's not just for practice owners, but office managers, this is too for you because a lot of times, if you're truly an office manager, right, you're running the business side, like there's some leadership aspects of managing associates as well. So I think going through this is going to be really fun. I know we just hired another associate. We've had several associates. You have obviously managed several associates back at Satellite. So let's hop right in. So, Zach, what is the most common complaint you typically hear about associates in general, in your experience?
Well, the biggest complaint is they became an associate for a reason, right? They are either a previous owner or don't want to be an owner. So that's the first thing of having to deal with hiring, firing, training, all the nuances. They want to be able to walk in and be a dentist, right? So how do we fix that problem? Which we're going to talk about a lot today. But I think the biggest thing that they come in and they want to walk in that door at 9 o'clock or whenever it is, morning huddle time, and then walk out the door at 5 o'clock, wash their hands clean, and say, see you later. I mean, that's essentially what associates are wanting to do.
That's what they want to do, but that's not what practice owners want them to do, right? Practice owners want to be as hands off as possible as well. However, now you're a practice owner. So you have to wear the 34 hats that you're tasked with. And I think there's that common misconception, right? It's like why practice owners expect associates to think like them, but then nothing in the deal incentivizes them in general to want to do, like, yes, some people out of the goodness of their heart will still take on some of those tasks. At the end of the day, they're not really supposed to. I want my associate to work at the height of their license, right? But I think where we kind of have to delineate this, right, is if we look, for instance, at the military. I think this is a great, like, extreme ownership, right? So looking at the Navy SEALs, like, you've got your main person, and anybody in the military, I apologize if you're listening to this because this is not gonna be accurate, but you've got your main person that's commanding the troops, right? That are commanding all of the different squads of the troops, and then you have the leaders inside of the different squads, and then you have leaders within that as well. And so I think, to me, a rabbit hole I want to go down to is more or less not thinking of them as an owner, or why they're not thinking like an owner, but really we need to get them to be thinking like a leader in general, right? And I know we've talked about this not only with practice owners being a better leader, but also team leads being better leaders. And in general, if you're a better leader, then you'll be way more effective in any position you're in the practice, not just an associate.
In being that we have to enable them to do it and give them the tools and the availability and also see the value. Because, the big thing, a lot of the associates I dealt with in our practice, they didn't want to be an owner, but in some aspects, they wanted to have that control as an owner to be able to grow their production and their income in the practice. So having say to an extent of what they can and cannot do, I think really frees them to actually maximize their value in the practice.
If you have some ownership, right? Not necessarily like physical ownership, like on paper, but when you have that responsibility and that ownership, then naturally people will want, like, they still treat it like their baby almost, right? Like they treat it like it's their own. And that's where we've talked about with creating ownership within the team and responsibility, because not you as the owner or the office manager saying, okay, cool, here's all the ways that we need to do this, but working with them, alongside of them, to create those systems. Then through the creation process in general, they feel like it's part of theirs as well because they helped create it and they don't want it to fail.
It becomes their baby to without the financial risk taking on. And that's kind of the other thing is when you do this for associates and give them that feeling of, okay, you have kind of the ability as an owner without all the responsibilities financially as an owner, they start to buy in a lot more of saying, hey, I have the freedom to practice how I want and need to with my schedule. And that's how we split it up at the practice. Each provider kind of practiced a little bit different, but we had overlying standards for all of them that they had to uphold and keep. And, not every single one of them would use all their own materials or all their own instruments. There's barriers on that to make sure that we could still be profitable, but really open the gates of like, hey, you want to run shorter or longer appointment times for your op? Like, do it. You want to start offering these procedures? Perfect. Let's help empower you to get the CE you need in order to advance your skills as a dentist and be able to serve the patients better. And we saw massive success with providers there in the practice and really bringing home significant money every single year because they had that feeling. But then they left at 5 o'clock and the OM or the owners took care of all the underlying issues of people calling out or hiring, firing, writing people up. They just said, hey, this is what I need to change, and you support them. And it's two ways, right? The associates get that freedom, but they also have that support on the back end for them to feel this way.
And from an associate's perspective, like I know, unfortunately, like there are bad actors in both sides. Like, there's not a perfect scenario all the time, but you do get to choose a lot of times who you hire or who you work for. So stop complaining and try to figure out a situation where hopefully, you can find a mentor, somebody who will listen to you, will have that abundance mindset like we talk about, to be able to grow and nurture a relationship and an environment that makes sense for both parties. But also having the systems in place to where they can work, with the height of their license, right? So I think that's equally important where, for instance, back in, I don't know, 2021, I think it was. Yeah. So a year after COVID, we went on maternity leave with our third child. We couldn't find anybody for our practice, and I didn't want to spend 3 times as much for a locum to come in. But we found somebody who was renovating her office for 3 weeks out of the 6 weeks my wife wanted off. We had 3 weeks total that we were out and nothing was coming in. But we did have coverage for those 3 weeks. So 2 weeks had gone by. We were about to have somebody come in, but that doctor had never produced more than $6,000 a day in her own practice. Total, like with hygiene and everything. So we were like, it's going to be a little tough because my wife was producing 10,000 on her own pretty much every single day. But when you have the systems in place for them to plug and play, then as long as they're a good provider, they're professional, industry professional, then they're going to be able to produce a lot more in general, which is a win-win-win. So when she came in for those 3 weeks, she was producing $15,000 days every single day for 3 weeks. And so it pointed to creating the environment and the team and the systems to where an associate can actually thrive without having the mindset of being an owner. Because let's be honest, like even practice owners and managers, like we don't have the right side mindset to begin with. A lot of times we're terrible at business. So we need to be able to get in there and really focus on ourselves and work at growing as a leader, so that way we can lead others to also then lead. So leading through others.
I think this all goes back into Kirk, like this whole frame of how you actually operate your practice and where you're wanting to go. Like the other thing that we really need to make sure that we're doing is feeding our associates good work. I see all these broken relationships coming to practices where associates come in, and one at my old office, like he said, the doctor took all the great implant cases. Like I never got anything good. And he was kind of selfish with that. And that's unfortunate because that led to that doctor leaving. And fortunately, like we were able to get him because of the fact that he didn't feel valued or feel like there's like sufficient work coming to him. It's like all the crap cases the owner didn't want to deal with, all the patients he's like, that's not very good, or taking, there's full arch, all the full arch ends up going to me, or all the big crown cases all go to me. Like we need to empower our associates, because if you're an owner and you're paying your associate, say 35% of production, the other 65%, that's you. So if you're loading up your associates, you're actually having to do less work, more revenue, and you're able to stay in your lane, keep your associate happy. And the biggest problem that we have in dentistry today is the average associateship, according to the ADA, is 18 months, which is very sad. That's a year and a half. Like the practice I was at, we had associates standing for over 4 years. They're now going 5 or 6 years now. That's a long time. That's a huge win because they feel valued, because we pump these patients in. The owner doesn't take new patients anymore. if he can help it. All of them are funneled to the associates. All the big work is funneled to them and saying, hey, I trust you with my associate. He's actually better at this than I am. Having those conversations and saying, hey, you're in amazing hands, to make sure that they feel empowered, they feel valued, and sending that work to them.
And that's where articulating expectations to an associate are important. Like when you bring them on, right? So the system that we use to get the associate going, and this is the same thing like next week when our associate starts that we're going to start doing. Yes, my wife is going to do a couple of cases that were already scheduled, but for the most part, we feed them first. We don't just give them a bunch of class twos and my wife does all the crowns. We fill up their schedule to the brim so that way they're productive. And then you're earning that passive revenue, but then also you do the overflow. So especially like my wife is typically a stronger treatment planner and can close a lot more treatments. So what we'll do is like she'll be in hygiene while the associate for the first few weeks is just doing dentistry and understanding the workflow of the practice. Then that associate starts getting into hygiene as she's handing off those patients. And then my wife is just doing the overflow in general. And what happens naturally is that, they're happy because they're producing, which means they're making money. Um, and then ultimately you're getting more done because now you're doing more hygiene, you're building those more like relationships, you're moving them on to another associate who you do trust and who you relay that trust to the patient. It's setting that expectation of like, hey, I want you to do more work, not having that scarcity mindset of like, oh, well, I'm going to do everything and you're going to get the overflow.
Yeah, and I think the back end on this too is how often do you meet with your associate to see where they're at, investing in the partnership, but also relationship of, Kirk, how are you doing? Not just so much of how's dentistry going, but like how are you? How do you feel, things are going at the practice? Are there issues that you want to bring up that we can resolve? Like, and doing that frequently, minimum of once a month, just touching base. Is your new patient volume where you want it to be? Is your production where you want it to be? What are things that you would like to see improved? How are your team members? How can I better come alongside you and support you? Having these conversations with your associates are super important because then they feel the value is there and it's consistent. You have to be genuine about it. You have to be intentional about these conversations if you want your practice to grow. I feel like that's one of your biggest trigger points, honestly, more than your dentist being able to be quick and add that production on a timely fashion. Like if you invest in them and feel that they feel valued, dude, that's going to change the numbers more than anything because they're like, hey, I have somebody alongside me. And you also have this blessing of being able to work alongside another dentist, right? You're not just solo practicing. So if you're looking at something saying, hey, I'm not sure on this, will you come take a look? Being open to look at each other's work and saying, no, I would actually do a crown instead on this one, and this is why. And value each other's opinion. Say, hey, I can see where you would go and do a filling on this. Like, just this is the route I would take. You feel free to do whatever way you want to go, but that's what I would do. I would see our dentists all the time going back and forth, trading off on opinions on work too.
That's what they do in the hospitals. I mean, a lot of times, right? Right, they're always talking. That being said, so we've set expectation for associates now and kind of like what to do, like how we want to help pour into them, and we have an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset. But what does that associate onboarding process typically look like, and what should it look like? Like,
Oh man, I've onboarded a lot of associates. I've headhunted and hired and credentialed all the jazz. I think one of the big failures we have is we hire an associate and then figure out everything on the back end as far as credentialing. We already have them started and they're not getting paid. The practice is losing money because we were backwards on it. When you are thinking you need an associate, you should be looking 6 months before that. Like you need to be way ahead of the game and setting out clear guidance and guidelines with your associate of I'm looking to onboard at this time, and give them a time frame, not an exact date, but say somewhere between January and through March. So if I'm looking right now, honestly, it's May, and I need an associate by March or April, I should be looking minimum now, probably sooner. And then once we get a contract laid out, say it's signed, all those packets for credentialing start getting filled out on that same day and submitted, because we want to make sure this dentist is credentialed well before their start date. So then when they go and sit in this chair, they're not held up by, okay, they can only see Delta patients or they can only see Cigna patients because that's who they're credentialed with. They have a full suite of credentialing that's done. And then also that gives our team a month before that doctor comes in and we could do 6 months before if we're doing hygiene, filling up and assigning those exams to them. But like a month before they come in, filling their treatment with new patients, emergencies, existing patients that need treatment that the other providers are flowing over because they're too packed, and have their schedule full for their first 2 to 5 weeks, depending on what you're able to do. Pack this dentist with as much work as you possibly can. Obviously, give them the first couple days of like not insanity, have a very structured schedule for them, but this will allow you to not be handcuffed because of credentialing or other outlying issues, and you can have them full from day one. We did that with one of our pediatric dentists. He never had a not busy day from day one starting. We kept him full because we had a system in place, had him fully credentialed before he ever stepped foot into practicing on day one. There was maybe like one or two insurances that we were stuck on, which that can happen, but at least 80%, 90% of the insurances he was ready to go, so we were not stuck.
That's an ideal world, and that would be great. However, ours started 2 weeks after we signed the contract. So, not always a possibility depending on what you're trying to do. But, another thing is you can get, an umbrella MPI and get those credentialed and do all sorts of things there. But yes, I mean, that's one of the onboarding things that I feel like is definitely overlooked, or it's backpedaled depending on the situation. And if you can do it in advance like that, then that is ideal, which is great. I think another thing, like what we talked about, is having like the payment structures understood, right? Like for instance, with clear aligners, it may be different than what the actual 32% or whatever of collections or whatever their compensation is. Like having those discussions on the front end, so that way people know this is what we're doing, or this amount of your lab bill, or whatever it is, right? Being very clear with expectations versus just kind of throwing them in. There's this random algorithm. They don't know how to do it. They never get to see their production and collections. Personally, what I do, if they want to get paid, make sure it's okay, they have to sign their production at the end of the day on the day sheet. Like, yes, this is correct. I don't understand why you would not want your doctor to see what they did.
Because they're being shady.
Well, that too. Yeah, okay. I have seen that. However, I think it's just a lack of awareness too. Like if you're not being shady, right? It's just a lack of awareness. But I would argue that you're missing a lot by like them not seeing what maybe some codes were not put in there properly, or not put in there at all. But they did the work, so you want to get paid for it.
Absolutely. No, transparency in numbers is key. Making sure, I told the doctors all the time, I will always pay you for what's due to you. But if you continually don't look at reports, I'm going to hammer it into you because this could have been handled before payroll was run. And I don't like to work backwards. So please check your adjustments. Please check your write offs. Please check, just glance. It's a very easy report. And I'd walk through and say, hey, I'll do the first week for you so you can see what you're looking for, what should be and shouldn't be, and then start setting them on my desk and I'll make sure they're handled before payroll. The transparency in numbers is key because even if you fix it, if it's something that we're screwing up consistently with the team, then they're going to be like, man, they mess up my payroll every single time. That's frustrating. You want to know the easiest way to piss somebody off? Mess with their money. Like that's the easiest way. I can make people angry all the time. I'll just screw with their money. And that ruins relationships very, very quickly. So you have to make sure that you're on point with that and clear with it. But the biggest point I think that you made, Kirk, that's more important than anybody or any point for us to understand is the pay. You need to make sure that the doctor can calculate it the same way you do. It needs to be a simple equation because, if you did Invisalign and you pay 50% of the fee is $6,000, you pay $3,000, that comes out of your pay, and then your 35% of adjusted production, your $100,000 is your adjusted production. You make $35,000 there minus the $3,000. Guess what? You make $32,000 that pay period. Like that's as simple as it should be. And because if there's a discrepancy, it's very easy to find because if Monday it's this and Tuesday it's that, you're going to have people that are very frustrated, not understanding their pay. And I had associates that said, hey, I never really understood how I got paid. I made okay money, but I never understood it because it was too complicated to track. I was just hoping it was always right. I don't want to be paid that way.
Yeah, no. Well, and that's the same thing with the bonus system, right? So the more complexity you have, if your team can't figure it out simply, they're not going to ever do it. But if your associate can figure out their pay very simply, then it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier and it takes out the complexity factor. How do you know when the structure is the issue versus like maybe the person is the wrong fit? Because I think this is also something where we get into of like, okay, yeah, they're not really working out, or is it operational? I know this is something we've talked about even like from the team, is like it may be operational. It's not the person. So, I mean, from your perspective, what have you seen?
Having multi-providers makes it very simple to see if it's operational. If all the providers are having an issue with it, it's very simple to pinpoint that. Um, I had very, very long conversations with a certain associate that, nobody else was having problems with, but this one was, and it was a delegation issue. And it was more of, this is an associate problem we need to work through, not an operational problem, because the other associate's working through it just fine. So I think you really have to dive into what is the issue and what is the personality that's having the issue, because every dentist is a little bit different. Looking at exactly pinpointing, okay, has any other associate had this problem? Yes, it's just a learning curve, or this is a consistent problem that we keep running into. As we onboard new associates, maybe we need to adjust that. And I think as owners and office managers, we need to have an open mind of understanding not everybody works exactly the same way. So is it something we need to train through, or is it something operational that we need to actually fix? When it comes to pay, wanting to make more money, that's a dental issue. If it comes to credentialing and in and out of network status, or flow of new patients, then that's an operational thing. And those are things that have to be, quite honestly, adjusted from time to time. We set things in stone of like, okay, 30% is going to go this way, and 60 or 90 or 70% is going to go the other way. Then as one dentist starts filling up, the other one might start feeling, hey, I need more patients. Like, we need to be able to adjust these systems and address them quickly. So I think it's case by case, Kirk, honestly. I think I just had the blessing of having so many dentists under one roof that I could tell real quick what was operational and what was the human element.
And it goes back to those check-ins like you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you doing? And
Yeah.
to me, like anytime we're having these conversations, I like asking, and this is with the team as well, when you're doing one-on-ones, is, what do you see going well? Great.
Yeah.
Here's what I see you going well. Then you go into, what do you think could improve? Because I don't want any bias. I just like, I know what they could improve on from what I'm seeing, but what can you improve on? And then they give you stuff. A lot of times this is the exact same thing that you're seeing, but then you go through, okay, well, here's what you can improve that I can see, and here are the resources to actually do that. Right. But if you have those pretty regular check-ins, like not to where it's overwhelming micromanaging, but it's just you're checking in on a frequent basis. I know I told our associate, like, hey, we're going to be having essentially coaching calls every other week, like just especially in the very beginning. I want to talk about leadership. I want to talk, how do you feel? Like, how's everything going? Where do we need to adjust? Not only from your perspective, but also the team perspective operationally. Because like you were saying, it's like sometimes you need to make adjustments. I remember the first time we hired an associate, every system that we had broke, every single one. And it was annoying as all get out. So we got in there and redid a lot of those things because it just didn't work the same with one doctor as it does, multiple doctors. Understanding that workflow is super important.
I had just a fun story. So a doctor came to me. They were applying to buy a house, and the form said, next projected raise, and they said, when will that be? And I kind of smiled and I said, never. You're paid, percentage of your production. She's like, never. And I said, not to be blunt or, really honest, that percentage isn't going to change. But from what I hear from you is you want to know when you're going to make more money, or that you would like to make more money. Is that correct? And they said, yes. And I said, perfect. So now that I understand the situation, now I know how to approach. So a lot of times with your dentist, understanding, like, if they're paid a percentage of production or collections, I'm biased towards production. I think it's a better way to keep and retain your associates longer. We can argue about that another day. But I talked to her and I said, listen, that percentage won't change, but your ability to produce more never will. So if you want to make more money, you have the ability every single month to make more money. Let me show you a few ways, but I need you to be open-minded. And that doctor, we increased her production like $200,000 that next year, which, in turn, she made another 70 grand just by small changes. I mean, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. How do we do more?" And that's where it started opening up these abilities to see these dentists say, "Hey, oh crap, like I can actually make a ton of money. Let me figure out how to monopolize on this and actually, bring more to the table." So there are tactics and things that you can use to really empower your providers to really produce on a more of a super producer level.
Yeah, but not require them to think like an owner.
Correct. Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
So bringing that all full circle, we tend to have this frame as owners, like, especially when you with your first associate, like, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to optimize the situation. We just know that we want help or we want to have more time home or whatever. And so, we want them to think like we do. But it's about really pouring into them and also finding somebody who's okay with being poured into. And then having the structure in the place like we've already talked about so far for them to thrive, not just survive and mainly, you know, do whatever all the crap stuff in the office. I think hitting just a few things like that. I've had a lot of associates reach out lately. It's like this is something that I'm really struggling with, or a lot of owners that are having problems with associates. I'm like, look, you're expecting something that's irrational. Like that's not what their job is. Their job is to be a doctor. I think it's very important to empower them as a leader and kind of go from there. But do you have any other thoughts besides what we've already talked about? I know we could go deeper, but to me,
No,
like I think
I
that's good.
think starting here is a good baseline for our listeners and viewers to start implementing and taking a peek at. I feel like if we go too deep, you guys are going to go crazy, and then you're going to come and complain to us because it didn't work. Start small, learn these tactics and tools, and then go from there. And if you want to reach in deeper, you know how to hit Kirk at Kirk Teachout. You can hit me up in my Facebook group, Dental Office Manager Leadership Network. Like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, wherever he's pointing off to the side. Um, give us 5-star review, write comments what you want to hear, feedback on these episodes of, hey, I agree, disagree. I'd love to get into those conversations with you guys, and I know Kirk will too. And we appreciate every one of you, coming in and listening to us, chat back and forth how we can be better leaders, managers, and owners.
Yep. Until next time, guys. It's been another great episode. See you.
See ya.
Come on, give me some. Yeah.